All right, thanks for joining. So today we're here to talk about Proactis's Invoice Capture module. Okay, I've previously run numerous webinars. I talked a lot about invoice automation in the past, also positioned some other products that can help you with automating your invoice process and invoice capture. But today we're going to focus purely on invoice capture, which is the Proactis module. Okay, just in relation to where it sits within the Proactis suite of modules, the majority of you, I think, joining the call will have P2P. Some of you may have some sort of AP automation utility or facility, but that's on the right-hand side of the slides here. It's important not to forget about the other elements of Proactis and how it can help you within your organisation, and really how AP automation is not just something that sits alone by itself. It's a whole conversation that needs to be had, really. It's not just about bringing invoices in and getting them read. It's about managing who you're dealing with, who your suppliers are, ensuring you are working with the right suppliers, ensuring you are getting the best prices, ensuring, the suppliers, again, that you're working with are sending you the correct document types. You've got contracts in place with them, if possible, where you're getting preferential buying rates based on the contract you've got with them. Again, thinking about having orders raised up front, where you're likely to get more accuracy with invoices coming in that are matched to orders. If you've got the capabilities, or your suppliers have the capabilities, then obviously there's more to talk about in relation to marketplace or punch outs, going directly out to their websites to raise your orders and bringing the order details back into Proactis with the negotiated pricing that you have with that particular supplier. Again, that will make your AP automation process much easier, much more efficient and much more accurate, if you do take on board some of the other elements as well. Again, these are conversations we can have directly with yourselves. Obviously, we can arrange separate sessions specifically for invoice capture. Although I'm going to present today, obviously it's going to be quite generic. I'm quite aware that when we come to talk about these things offline, you would want to see your specific invoices being processed through the utility, so you can see how it would work for you as an organisation. So obviously, please reach out after the session and we can arrange further sessions directly with yourselves to go through invoice capture's capabilities in a bit more detail. So what we're going to talk about today, or what we're covering, invoice capture, how it can streamline your processes and reduce manual workloads. Hopefully you'll see today throughout the slides, and also software that I'm going to present, really how it can improve your AP process. It takes away a lot of the manual processing and the manual checking, and it also gives you the ability to monitor and report on the invoices that are coming in from your supplier base, how accurate they are, how much manipulation they need, whether you're raising invoices for suppliers that haven't even been onboarded or vetted. So as an organisation, do you need to readdress your policies in relation to buying? So it can really open up lots of conversations and allow you to improve further your organisation's processes. We're going to demonstrate, I'm going to show you how it works as well. And we're going to talk a bit about implementation and what would be involved. And then obviously we can have questions. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. There's chat, I believe, on Teams, and there's also Q&A. So Louise will be monitoring them as we go through the session. If there's anything you want to ask, and Louise feels it's necessary to stop me mid-flow and ask the question, I'm happy for that to happen as well, or we can wait till the end. Or obviously you all know who I am. Please feel free to reach out and email me if you want to do that privately. That's fine too. Okay. So invoice automation, as I said, we've run various webinars and we've talked to you about lots of options and capabilities available when it comes to automating your invoice processing. So electronic invoicing, often utilised with marketplace or punch outs. When you're dealing with marketplace or punch outs, you're buying directly from your supplier's website. You're going outside of Proactis, you're buying directly from a supplier's website where they're maintaining the catalogues, they're maintaining the prices that you have with them. Once that order comes back in, you've got capabilities to e-invoice them. So once your order's approved, instead of you generating manual documents, the efficiencies come where you've got the ability to electronically invoice that supplier automatically. We've got the same capabilities with invoices. So once that supplier is ready to invoice you, we can receive invoices electronically. So there's no manual intervention there. You're not having to read PDFs or register invoices manually. They come directly into Proactis. Obviously, they'll go through validation, but that's something that, again, can help automate and streamline your AP processes. Okay, PO Flip. If you've got the portal, suppliers have the capability to log into that portal where they're onboarded, where they can communicate with you directly, where they can view contracts or orders or invoices, and they can take an order and they can flip it directly to an invoice, which will then come directly into P2P. Okay, we also have other capabilities which we will be talking about in the future. So we will be arranging further sessions to show you how we can work with order imports and invoice imports. So we have those utilities developed where we can import data from a spreadsheet and bring it into the system. However, today we are going to focus predominantly on invoice capture. That's what we're going to be talking about, and that's what we're going to be demonstrating. So just to be clear, invoice capture is a Proactis module. It's a Proactis module. It resides on the Proactis cloud, often integrated predominantly with Proactis cloud-hosted systems. However, it's not limited to that. So Proactis' invoice capture hosted in the cloud can integrate to an on-premise solution as well. Okay, the preference is obviously cloud-based. However, it can integrate to on-premise. Okay. And again, just to really position invoice capture, it reduces errors. You know, all invoices from day one can be pushed through the solution and read, validated, processed. It reduces manual intervention from your AP team. Only queries or need to be reviewed. So if the data is validated, it comes straight through into P2P. However, there are additional utilities in the event that you do need to intervene and you do need to query the invoice that's coming from the supplier. Obviously, when you're using these capture utilities, because the invoices are going through a utility and they're not being registered manually, you've got better reporting capabilities. So I'll show you those as we go through the solution, through the demo. Supplier emails. So invoices are sent to an email address, whether it's your AP email address or whether it's another dedicated email address. The data is read from those documents. So ideally, we want to work with PDFs. In most instances, they are the most intelligent document type where there is metadata behind the scenes, which can be extracted automatically from the document. Okay, if you've got Word documents, ideally, we would like you to save them as PDFs and push them through to the email address if possible. However, there are other capabilities if that's not an option for you. Supporting documents can be processed as well. Credit notes can also be processed by the utility. So it does use AI. It is intelligent. It's not relying on OCR. Initially, it will read supplier information. It will try and work out who the supplier is and link it to an available supplier in Proactis for you. But you have the option to intervene if you need to at any point. Okay. It will validate, obviously, any document going through the utility will be validated, whether you've got 100 or whether you've got 100,000. It makes no difference. Every single document will be checked. The supplier will try and link the supplier to the document automatically the first time you send an invoice through for a supplier. If it fails to do so, you can select the supplier. It will try and use company registration numbers, VAT registration numbers, logos. It will try and use logic based on what other organisations have saved as well in the past. So obviously it will try and recognise who they are. If you've got duplicate documents, you can obviously choose to ignore the records, you can push them through, or you can communicate directly with the supplier from the utility. So from Invoice Capture, you can send a communication out to the supplier. There's no need to launch a different screen or go into your emails. You can do so directly from Invoice Capture, where there's a full audit trail, and you'll be able to inquire on historic communication. If there are no PO, obviously with PO numbers, you know, most organisations will have a no PO, no pay policy. However, in the event that invoices do come through with no PO numbers, you've got, again, the ability to communicate back with your supplier if you need to. You can validate bank details within Invoice Capture. If you choose to validate bank details, it will typically do it for all suppliers. You can also validate company registration numbers, VAT numbers, and we can build in additional validation depending on what you want to achieve. There are additional features in Invoice Capture as well. So, for example, you could tell it to hold a supplier's invoice if it's over and above a certain amount. For certain suppliers, you might not expect to spend over a certain amount. However, if you receive an invoice from that supplier that's not what you're used to, as an organisation, you can flag it. So you've got various options with how you flag data coming in and how you stop it from going through automatically in the event that you want to intervene. And this screen just shows you the flow, really. So just starting from obviously left to right. So the supplier will send through an invoice. It will go through what we call the query desk, and it will validate. Okay. It will extract the data, it will extract the supplier, the PO number if it's available, the date, the amounts, the invoice numbers, anything else we've asked it to extract that we can possibly retrieve from the document. And obviously, if it's valid, it will push through into P2P. If not, it can go back to query desk, where you can communicate back with the supplier.
Christina, we just have a quick question. Sorry. Could
Hi.
you just could you just explain how the bank details validation is done automatically?
Yeah, so obviously for us to be able to validate bank details, we need to be able to read them. So ideally, we would need to either be able to tap into where you're holding your bank details, or we would pull them through from where they're being held, if we've got the capability to do so. Some organisations don't allow us to do that based on security. Some companies do. So obviously it's all behind the scenes. It's not necessarily information that's visible to the people that are querying the invoices and managing them, but it can sit behind the scenes. And obviously if it sits behind the scenes, as the invoice comes in from the supplier, the majority of invoices will have bank details on them, and that's what it will check against. So on a supplier's invoice, if they are presenting you with a sort code, account number, it can validate against that information that obviously you're holding within your bank software or your finance system. Okay, once we turn bank detail validation on, then typically it would be on for the majority of suppliers. So if you do have some suppliers sending invoices through that don't have any bank details on them, they're going to be held. It's going to say, it's going to stop in the utility because it's expecting to validate details that it can't find. Okay, so we can talk about this in more detail. Every organisation's obviously slightly different. Some organisations will receive the majority of their invoices will have bank details, and that would work fine for them to have that validation on. If you find that the majority of your invoices don't have bank details on them, then turning that validation on may just, I mean, what we don't want to do is slow the process down, obviously, and have the AP team having to intervene unnecessarily, but it may result in that because all the invoices are being trapped because it's expecting details and can't find them. But yeah, please reach out. We can have further conversations about that if necessary. Okay. So this is, I'm going to dip into software in a moment. I'm just going to show you, I just have some slides just to show you about typically what you would see when you would log into Invoice Capture and the process. So this would be your home screen. So on your home screen, it will present you with various pieces of information. It shows you the invoices that are in progress, how many have been received today, how many have been exported. So export means push through into Proactis. Okay, it shows you how many suppliers you've got onboarded through the utility. Now it reads suppliers from Proactis, so it will feed your supplier information in. So as you create new suppliers in your finance system that flow through into Proactis, they will upload into Invoice Capture. It will also bring through your supplier invoice numbers, so it will know whether they're a duplicate or not. It will also feed through POs from your Proactis system, so it knows which POs are open, which ones it can match the invoice to. So it's reading information, it's reading the data, it's pulling the data through, and it's reading it and it's validating. Okay. It shows you some statistics, so you can see how many have been exported within a given month, your query responses. So if you've got communication going on with your supplier, or you've got people adding comments to documents, you can see that information here as well. And it shows you your open batches. So batches consist of the invoices that have been, or credit notes that have been fed through from the last time the job ran. So the job will run in the background, reading invoices or bringing them through. And however frequently it runs, you'll get your batches created. You can break out batches based on suppliers or document types if you want to. Otherwise, you'll get a number of invoices in a batch. And within it, it will show you how many have been processed, how many have been exported, how many are open. So invoices can come through. You might end up with 10 in a batch, and 8 of them might have exported straight away because they've been validated in the background and no intervention is required. And they'll end up in Proactis. And obviously, once invoices end up in Proactis, Proactis does what it does best. It will check the PO number. It will obviously match the invoice if it agrees to the PO. If there are any discrepancies, then obviously it will stop. And you can review those within tasks, or you can edit the invoice in the tray. You can also see document exceptions. So this is quite a powerful utility. It's very simple, but it's quite powerful because as it stands currently, without any invoice capture utilities, it's very difficult to interpret the invoices that are coming through and identify how many are accurate and how many aren't. I mean, we're helping you with dashboards, identifying retrospective ordering, invoice accuracy, but these utilities really do go a step further. They really do analyze the data in more detail. And you can see from the statuses you've got here, it will automatically allocate a status to a document. So you can analyze very quickly how many suppliers are sending you invoices with no invoice number, or the invoice date is wrong or blank, or the values don't agree. And you can choose as a user how much information to see on your graphs. Okay, so I've got an example here of an invoice that's come in. I can see which batch it related to. So at any point, obviously, I can go back and interrogate the rest of the batch and see what else was included, which other invoices were included in there as well. But as the invoice comes in, it knows who the supplier is and it retrieves the information from the document. And you can see it's highlighted on the right-hand side of the screen. It's highlighted the relevant information and it's married it back to the document that's come through. And on the right-hand side at the bottom of the screen, you can see any validation issues or errors that you've got there. So you can see it's a duplicate invoice number. Invoice date is prior to earliest allowed date. So it's stopped. Now we can control what the earliest date allowed date is. If we decide we don't want any invoices before 2025, we can control what that date is. But it will flag any invoices that do come in with a date prior to that. So it's not going to stop them coming in. It's just going to flag them. Okay. Again, document detail validation, bank detail validation. So there is some extra validation on this particular invoice. But from here, I can decide what I want to do with that document. So just to pop it out to just show a bit more information. I can decide whether I want to rectify any errors manually. I can save the document and continue with it later, or I can send it to Query Desk. So the Query Desk function is like it's a two-step process. So the documents will come through. If they're valid, they go through, great. If they're not, they'll stop and be held here. And then you can send them to Query Desk. And from within Query Desk, you can manage those documents further. So if you want to communicate out to your supplier and ask them questions about the document, you can do so. Okay, if you've got permissions to do both, view the errors and manage Query Desk, then you can do it all on one screen, which I will show you later on. Again, another example of an invoice that's come through. It's retrieving the information. It will do its best to retrieve the information. Obviously, we talked about PDFs, and PDFs have metadata behind the scenes, so it can read the information. It reads the labels and it knows where to retrieve the data from. In most instances, it will do it correctly. You can put warnings on your suppliers. So you can put alerts. So for a particular supplier, you can say, we've got a no PO, no pay policy, and it can flag up pins. You can have pins all over the screen with lots of different alerts, just warning your AP team, letting them know. You know, or you might have something that says we need to process these ASAP, or will be put on stop. Whatever it relates to, you can add as many notifications as you like. Okay. Once you decide to communicate with your supplier, if I just take you back, so in this example, we had missing data, missing order number. So in that instance, if you wanted to communicate back with your supplier and say to them, you know, we've got a missing order number, do you know what it is? Can you provide it? You can generate the query, go to Query Desk, initiate conversation with your supplier, put some text in. There are templates in the background, so depending on the template you pick up, it can put in predefined text for you. It can also control the email layout that goes out to the supplier and how frequently you send reminders. But based on the validation messages that appeared, the system will know which tick boxes to put at the bottom of the screen. So you can see order number is selected there because it knows that order number is the issue we have here. So that will send a communication back to the supplier. They'll receive an email where they can click on the link and it will take them directly into that document where if you give them permissions to do so, they can update the order number themselves. Okay, so that's quite key. So where we're giving suppliers permissions to do so, when we send out our query with the issue, suppliers can log in directly to that document and add the information on that they need. They're very restricted with what else they can do. They can only edit the fields we make available to them. Okay, so if we've made order number available, they can log into the document. They'll be presented with a screen that provides them with the order number to complete, and they can update that themselves. And that will then push, that will then revalidate. Once they've entered that order number, the system will revalidate. It will check the order number exists and it is valid for that supplier. And if it validates it successfully, it will push it straight through into P2P automatically. So you won't need to intervene again as the AP team. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into software, unless there's any more questions, Louise, before I do this.
No, we're all good.
Great, brilliant. Okay, so this is live software now. So this is my Invoice Capture demo system. So it might look slightly different to the screens that I've shared with you now. But I can see today I've received 13 invoices. So I've been putting some batches through. I can see what's in progress. I can see how many have been exported. And as I scroll down the screen, I can see how many were in my batches. So in today's batches, I had a batch of 5. I also had a batch of 2. I can see my query responses. I can pop the information out if I want to and view more information, but I'm just going to scroll down and we've got some more statistics here. So within September, I can see how many were queried, what the total invoices were, the percentages as well. So which percentage of those of the invoices coming through actually went through Query Desk. I can see my document exceptions. So if I decide I don't want to see how many had a missing order number or how many had a missing document date, I can choose to remove that detail very easily. So as I said previously, it's very difficult to analyze this information if you don't have the data going through a utility in the first instance. We're not saying Invoice Capture will be suitable for every single invoice that goes through your business, but it will be able to process the majority of them. There are some suppliers that send invoices through potentially where the document is just not readable. Those would not be suitable for any capture utility, not just Proactis. You might get suppliers sending documents through where they've got hundreds and hundreds of lines on them, and they're direct invoices. They may not be suitable to go through Invoice Capture. So depending on each organisation and the types of invoices they receive, we'll take them offline. We'll obviously have conversations with you. We'll look at those examples. We'll look at those documents, and we'll work with you to decide whether they would be suitable for Invoice Capture or whether we can position something else. So it's very normal to have a hybrid approach. So Invoice Capture for 95% of your invoices, but for the other 5%, they might come in using an invoice import utility, which we've got, which we will be sharing with you very shortly and demonstrating as well in another session. So you might want to think about an invoice import from a spreadsheet, or you might want to think about an e-invoice. Maybe you can retrieve the information directly from the supplier's website as a feed. So there are other options available, but if we can automate the majority of invoices, that's what we need to try and do to really give you more efficiencies. So that's the dashboard. So you've got options. So if I just navigate, depending on your permissions, obviously this is all permissions based. So depending on your user, how many rights you have within Invoice Capture will determine which options you've got here. So within my work list, I've got the ability to upload documents. If I wanted to upload an invoice into the utility, maybe it had been sent directly to my email address and I want to upload it as opposed to emailing it to the utility myself, I've got the ability to do so. Okay, I'm just going to navigate to the batches and just view the ones that came in today. So TSM, and I can see I'm going to work with the top batch. I've got a batch that contains 5 documents, 4 are work in progress, 1 has been verified. I'm just going to click into it and I'm seeing the 4. If I just go back and I just filter my screen and just show all documents, and again, just navigate back to my batch, I'm seeing all 5. Okay, so I want to see all the invoices that have come through in that batch and I want to have a look at what's wrong with them. So I'm going to go into each one in turn and just see what it's failed on. Okay, so I've intentionally registered invoices through the utility that will fail. It's all well and good them going through successfully, which is obviously great and what we would want to get to. But for a demo, we want to see failures. So you can see the kind of information it will validate against. So I'm just going to navigate into my document. So I haven't manipulated these in any way. I've just loaded them in as the batch. It's automatically linked them to a particular supplier. So it knows, based on this document, which supplier in Proactis to link it to. So it's done that for me automatically. In most instances, it will do that for you. You can see it's retrieved the details, the invoice number. It's retrieved the date. It's retrieved the order number and the values. Now it's retrieved the values from the line. In this instance, it's worked well, it's worked fine. However, if this particular invoice contained more than 1 line, we might have a problem with how it's reading the information. Okay, so it's doing its best. It's found headings net VAT gross, so it's retrieved the information from there. I mean, ideally we want it reading from the bottom, but in this instance, it's read it from the top. Okay, this particular document, it wouldn't have an issue with it. I mean, it's failed. I don't have an order number in Proactis with this number, so it won't actually go through, but I've trapped it here. But what I can do, if I wanted to, I could save it. If I decided I don't want it to go through with an order number and I wanted to push it through without, I can just save it. If I decided I wanted to change where it's retrieving the values from, So I decide I don't want it to retrieve the values from the line here. I want it to retrieve them from the footer of the document. I can tell it where to pull the values from. Now I'm doing this for this document. If I want to make the changes and save them for future documents that come through from this supplier, so I've saved that one, it's taken me to the next one. If I wanted to save, that one's gone through and it's exported. So I've just navigated back to it. So as I saved it, it's successful, it's date stamped it, time stamped it, and that's going to try and push through into P2P. Now, if I've had a document and I wanted to save the details for future use, so it learns, I've got the ability to go in and edit extraction rules. Okay, so I can tell it for future documents that come through from this supplier, move to this position on the document. Don't retrieve it from where you've tried to, retrieve it from somewhere else. Okay. I've got another document that's come through. So it's retrieved the date, it's retrieved the invoice number, it's retrieved the net, it's got missing information, it's got a missing order number, so it's going to fail. So I've told my system I want it to validate on order numbers. You don't have to. You can do it on a supplier by supplier basis. So if you have some suppliers that never send order numbers and you're absolutely comfortable with that as an organisation, and you don't have a no PO, no pay policy, which we would encourage you to do, of course, then you can flag certain suppliers to say, we don't expect an order number from them, in which case it won't fail in the utility, it won't go into query, and it will go straight through. Okay, so that's why this one will have failed. I'm just going to flick through to the next document. Again, another invoice from this supplier. It's got missing data. It doesn't know where to pick the tax up from. It hasn't picked up any tax. It's 0. It also hasn't picked up the invoice number. So it hasn't recognized where to pick the invoice number up from this particular document. So I'm going to teach it and it will learn. Okay. And at any point, if I want to check the document and check the information's correct, I can click save. And as you can see, the data changes. the validation messages change, sorry. So I don't have bank details validation on this particular demo, but you could have it turned on, in which case you would see bank validation information at the bottom of the screen as well. Now, in the event that I want to communicate out to my supplier and I want to ask them to provide me with the missing order number, I can do so. So if I wanted to send communication out to the supplier, it knows which fields are missing. It's only going to provide the supplier with that information based on the errors that have come up. I can send it to Query Desk. So I'm going to raise an external query. You've got various options on here. I can add a comment. And I can click send. Now that's gone into Query Desk. However, I've got permissions to access the Query Desk directly from my screen. I've got permissions as this particular user. Otherwise, you could just go through your invoices, mark them as queries, and somebody else within the team can manage those queries. So you can have segregation of duties there if you want to. Okay. However, I'm going to click Raise Query, and this is the start of the query with the supplier. So now I'm going to initiate communication with my supplier. I'm going to say, I want to send out an email to my supplier. I can choose the template I'm using. If you've got multiple templates in here, you can pick the relevant template and it will default the information on the screen for you, which you can still manipulate. But it determines the template and the text that's going to be used on the email that goes out as well. Okay. You can also set reminders. So if the supplier doesn't respond in a timely fashion, you can choose to remind them. They'll get a number of reminders. Obviously, once the reminders are finished, you've got the ability to cancel the invoice in here. You don't have to process it. You can delete it from Invoice Capture. If they're not responding to you, you've got other options available. So the system has automatically worked out the order number is the field that's missing. So that's the box it's ticked. If I want the supplier to communicate with me, but just not give them the ability to update the order number themselves, I can untick the fields. Okay. I'm going to leave it ticked for now, and I'm just going to click send. Okay, now that will send out an email to the supplier, and that will end up in my inbox. So just bear with me a moment. I'm just going to stop sharing temporarily while I check what's in my inbox before I share my screen with everybody. And I'm going to show you how the supplier can respond. So I just want to make sure I get rid of other emails that are in there. Okay, so I'm just going to reshare my screen again. Okay, so this is the email that's just come through at 1:37. So if I just navigate to it, I'm just going to download the pictures as well. So it's come from Proactis. Obviously, you can have your logos on the screen. This is what the supplier will receive. So the supplier is receiving communication from yourselves, from your AP team, asking them to review a query. So this is the text that I typed in. And they can click on the link, which will take them directly into the document. So I've still got the document open on another screen, so it will launch. Hopefully it will get through Mimecast. Here we go. So this is the document that we're querying, their invoice, and it's giving them the ability to type in the order number. So if they do know it, if they just didn't provide it, then obviously they can update the document. I'm just going to put something in. Okay. And obviously Invoice Capture will still validate that's a valid document. And the supplier can enter comments and they can submit. And once they've submitted, if I just find the right screen, just bear with me. Here we go. Oh, 1 minute. Sorry, bear with me. I'm just having trouble with my screen sharing at the moment. I don't know what's doing. Oh, there we go. That's better. So I'm just going to reshare that again. Sorry, it didn't size properly. If I navigate back into Invoice Capture, so this is the same document. I haven't manipulated it at all. Literally all I've done is just had trouble sharing my screen. But it's updated. The supplier's comments have updated directly on the document. So that's their order number that they provided. And as far as Invoice Capture is concerned, it's decided, yep, that's valid, that's okay, and it's saved the document. So that's gone through. That will go through into P2P. That's because it's considered it valid. If I just nip back to the previous one, here we go. There we go. That's exported. Export started. So it thinks it's successful. Okay. If I just tab through another example I've got here. So again, you know, it's retrieved the document's been read, it matches to this, it's found a supplier, the invoice number's been received, the date has been read, the values have been read, but it's got various validation issues, missing data, missing order number, duplicate invoice number, invoice date is prior to an earliest allowed date. So, I mean, you can add additional validation on if you need to. Okay, we've got clients asking us for, they want to manipulate the documents in Invoice Capture before they go into Proactis. They want to choose the invoice tray, or they want to link it to a particular site, which will determine which department it ends up linking to in Proactis. So we can manipulate things. And in the background, again, against the supplier, we can put additional flags on so we can check that the document doesn't exceed a certain value, or it, etc. So we've got other options as well. So there are lots and lots of capabilities with Invoice Capture. Nothing is going through into Proactis without it being fully validated. And any validation that takes place is auditable. You can report on it, and you can obviously it provides you with the information to help rectify those issues and analyse your suppliers more. You know, you might decide off the back of it receiving invoices from certain suppliers, after analysing the information, you might decide as a business, actually, we're not going to work with them anymore. The invoices are never accurate. They're over invoicing us. They're invoicing us for goods and services that they've not delivered. And we've decided it's not worth our time. And there are other suppliers out there potentially that you may want to work with instead. So it really does give you additional insights into the invoices being received and the types of issues you will have with them. But issues aside, the majority of documents going through the utility will go through successfully. Obviously, I've trapped loads of issues here purely for demo purposes, but in a real life scenario, they are going to go through successfully. And that's ideally what you want. You want to take the pain away from the AP team, focus their efforts on other tasks, you know, within the department, and really not have that manual intervention, manual keying in data when you've got the utilities that can do it for you. Okay. I'm just going to navigate back to my slides. Okay, so what's coming next? So lots of people are asking about, can it do line level reading as well? So if you've got direct invoices, I mean, with all invoice capture utilities, you have to bear in mind that if you've got order numbers being quoted on documents, you're going to get more efficiencies. You're always going to have more efficiencies, and the process is going to be more streamlined if you've got an order number up front. So with the order number up front, the coding has already taken place, the approval has already taken place, the invoice comes in, it should match. If it matches, it goes straight through into the finance system for payment. Obviously, the quicker you pay your suppliers, the better the relationship is. The last thing you want is to be put on block by your suppliers. Okay. However, there are instances where you do receive direct invoices. Some organisations don't have any at all. Even utilities get registered as a PO, even if it's a blanket PO or a call-off PO, however you want to refer to it as, or an estimate. They raise POs up front. Some companies don't have that approach, and they do raise direct invoices, in which case the invoice capture utility, we look at it on an individual client basis. Okay, so it predominantly reads header information. If you did want it to really read line level information, we'd have to look at that offline and see what we can do for you, depending on the types of invoices you're receiving and where the information is presented and how it's presented, how clear it is. Okay, so those are conversations we can have. Please reach out if it's something you want to talk about. However, Proactis, what's coming, Rego Kai is coming, which gives you the engine to automatically code your direct invoices once they've come into Proactis. So it's not released yet. I don't have a date for it just yet, but as soon as we do have information, obviously we will make you aware of that. But basically, as your invoice comes in, your direct invoice, it will present you potentially with codes that it's used in the past. It will highlight which ones are the most accurate based on what it's processed in the past. And it can help, again, it can help the AP team with invoice processing. So that's something that's coming in the future. Okay. And with the two together, with Invoice Capture and in the future, Kai, really it can improve your whole AP processing. Okay, with better visibility of invoices, fewer invoice mismatches, quicker processing times, more accuracy, you know, the AP team not having to guess what the coding should be, and it presenting you intelligently with what the codes should be. That will give you hopefully a more efficient AP function. So this screen just highlights what we've covered up till now with our webinars. All of the webinars are available. You can get them from our website. There's our new website has a section called webinars in one of the drop downs, and you can view them all from there. So we've covered product updates, reporting, invoice automation, supplier management, contract management. We've done it, but we're doing invoice capture now. We're hoping to run a session in the next few weeks just to talk about product updates. However, please just keep an eye on the newsletters. We're aware that some organisations are having them blocked, obviously, you know, because they're coming from marketing. So maybe reach out to your IT team and see if they can be released, because they do contain quite important content. Not just about, you know, webinars, but about key new features or things that are being released, or really things you need to be aware of. And also not forgetting our customer day. So we've got a customer day on the 13th of November. If you would like, you can register. We'd love to see you there. Are there any more questions? And just in relation to implementing invoice capture, obviously, if you did want to go ahead with invoice capture, please reach out to myself or Louise and Sarah, your account managers, and we can start those conversations off. It's not it's not a long project. Obviously, there'll be an element of set up from Proactis' side because it's hosted within their cloud, but we will work with you on getting the invoices through and testing UAT and get you ready for live. Are there any more questions?
No, Christina, no questions, not at the minute.
Brilliant. Okay. Obviously, as I said, please feel free to message me directly, or Louise and Sarah if you would prefer that. I also don't forget the drop-in sessions. If you do have any questions, drop-in sessions run on a Friday at 10 till 10:30, or no, 10:30 till 11, I think it is. Oh goodness, I can't remember, the time's changed. But yeah, please feel free to drop in and ask any other questions you might have during those sessions. Thank you all for joining.